Hello, everyone. This is Mehul Desai from Tntra. Welcome once again to the Tntra Podcast. This is episode 3, continuing our conversation on the Holy Grail of FinTech. And today we will attempt to dig deeper into the Indian FinTech evolution, revolution, as we've titled our podcast for today. This is the Holy Grail of FinTech, IndiaStack and beyond. And I have a dear friend, Dilip Asbe, here as our guest on this podcast. Welcome, Dilip, to the Tntra Podcast.
Thank you, Mehul.
Great. Thank you so much. I know it's so difficult for you to carve time out from your extremely busy schedule. And, we at all of us at Tntra absolutely appreciate that. And I'm sure this conversation is going to be helpful and inspiring for so many folks out there. So as we do in the Tntra podcast, I'm going to take a few minutes, just do a quick background on myself, do a little bit of the framework for the conversation today, and then hand it over to Dilip to requesting him to do the same. So on myself, I have spent a good part of the last 30 years in, once again, what the world now calls FinTech. Had an opportunity to work on mobile wallets very early on, got to deploy them, mobile wallets, mobile commerce, payment infrastructure all around the world. Built a company out of the US and eventually sold that to MasterCard in 2014. In the process, worked across every major market, worked with most large infrastructure providers, worked on financial services, retail applications, also got to dabble a little bit on the healthcare side, on the government side. And all in all, it was a fantastic run. Amongst other things, it gave me an opportunity to connect with, meet with, and collaborate with friends and colleagues like Dilip. Clearly that is something that I absolutely cherish and value the most. Since then, in the last few years, I've built a few more companies, sold a couple, shut down a couple, had an opportunity to take one company public on the London Stock Exchange. So just got to do, again, lots of interesting things using technology across lots of different application areas. I'm a big believer in intellectual property. I have 90 plus patents issued out of the US. I've had an opportunity to publish 2 books. Worked a little bit on the government side at a task force at the Federal Reserve in the US for a few years. I'm doing something at a state level specific to education now. Have had an opportunity to dabble a little bit on knowledge economies, knowledge cities, food safety, new education models, and essentially, again, it's been a great run. And so, in many ways, Tntra for me is a culmination of the last 30 years of the work that I've been doing. And again, as a kind of a quick reminder for the audience, Tntra as an innovation ecosystem has 5 parts to it. We have engineering services, we have a venture fund, we have our incubator, we have our academy where we build people that we call Gurukul, and we have a fit-to-purpose enterprise platform for continuing education, for innovation, and for other enterprise knowledge-sharing functions that we call Yantra. And so these 5 pieces kind of come together to form Tntra. And all of this is supported by a global network of domain experts. In terms of domains, our focus is on FinTech, health tech, IoT, supply chain, and new economy. And so with that said, coming specifically to the current series, we started conversations on FinTech. We've titled it The Holy Grail of FinTech. And in the last episode, I essentially framed from my perspective, using, of course, my journey in FinTech, to talk a little bit about, the early days of what I call the plumbing, how that has led to a lot of different applications, some disruptive, some not, all around the world. how in many ways decentralized finance, I believe, and I would love to find a way to truly turn it into democratizing finance. And we talked a little bit about kind of what democratizing finance would mean, and introduce the term the normalization of the cost of accessing capital. And so in the last podcast, we kind of laid this structure in place. And the attempt now, starting with the conversation today with Dilip, is to kind of explore from Dilip's perspective, not just the evolution of fintech, but also how he views the holy grail of fintech, specifically in terms of democratizing finance, and where the world, from his perspective, will be. When it comes to India, I've had some experience in India. I had an opportunity to deploy the first version of Indian railway ticketing for IRCTC. This was a long time back. Also had an opportunity to deploy our technology to power Narega payments, the social program, along with Sam Petroda and his colleagues at the Knowledge Commission, Dr. Garola, Nandan Nilkani. I had an opportunity to support them and do some very early work on what has now become IndiaStack. And so I've had an opportunity to work directly and indirectly on a lot of different interesting things in India. And several years ago, when the government announced demonetization, as much as there are a lot of different perspectives to that kind of watershed milestone moment, as a pure fintechnocrat, my view then, and it continues to be today, is that in a way it kind of became India's Asian Games moment. And what I mean by that is, when India launched or hosted rather its first Asian Games, it ushered in so many color television sets in India. And prior to that, really, people in India did not have a good reason to go out and buy a color television set. And so when demonetization was announced, as a fintechnocrat, I personally thought that that essentially became a catalyst to really move India towards all kinds of electronic payment. Very transformative, some disruptive, some not, but clearly became a huge catalyst towards driving consumers, citizens to do electronic payments of all kinds. And that's really where Dilip comes in. Of course, Dilip's journey in fintech started a long time ago. But frankly, from my perspective, and I say this more as a friend, if it wasn't for Dilip and his colleagues and all the fantastic work that they've been doing over decades now at NPCI, and to make sure that the right infrastructure was in place, clearly we would not be anywhere close to where we are in India today with electronic payments. And we absolutely would not have been in a position to leverage that Asian Games moment. And so with that said, I would like to turn it over to Dilip. Dilip, once again, thank you so much. Welcome to Tntra's podcast. And I would appreciate it if you could do a little background on yourself for the benefit of our audience, and also give your general perspective on fintech. And we can then kind of use that to get into a little bit more discussion on the Holy Grail.
Thank you so much, Mehul, for inviting me to participate in this podcast. And hello to all your listeners. I believe next 45 minutes or so, we are going to have a very engaging conversation, looking back, reflecting, and also kind of drawing back the future which India dreams of, right, as far as digitization or digital payments as a whole. So, Mehul, I'm an engineering graduate myself. I did my graduation back in '97 from Mumbai University. I studied from Father Agnell's college in Bandra, and then I joined the tech company. Started some of the coding jobs as routine, and right from the beginning, most of the efforts or most of the attention was on the financial services, right? So because My first job was at Bombay Stock Exchange, right? Got used to the Bolt software and its operations, and a very high scale transaction processing platforms. And then, kind of looking back to Western Union, then some bit of amount of consulting with the Opus software solutions in Pune, and then I met the gentleman Lonnie Anthony in uh, Euronet, India. He was starting off with the Euronet's operations in India, and then I started working with him and the other colleagues, and about 8 years in Euronet, setting up the whole ATM business, setting up the first ATM interoperable network in the country, CashNet. Then also the mobile top up. We were the first one to connect to the telecom operators for the mobile recharge, and was very exciting that time to work with all the leading telcos to look at how they look at the financial services world, and so that was Euronet. And after that, when the NPCI, I heard in 2007-8 the NPCI being set up, and I knew one of the ex-executive directors of Reserve Bank of India, who was actually instrumental in building or setting up this, evangelizing this idea of NPCI kind of institute, and the execution was done by then the later on RBI and the IBA and the leading banks. So there was an opportunity, and I said in 2009, and I said, let me try this out, because I have done payments all my life, and there is a entity which is being set up as to be the national backbone for payments. And I said, let me try this out. Obviously, a lot of questions in my mind that I worked all the time in MNCs, and how do I adjust back to the public company and public good company in that sense. And initial few months, few years, that hesitation remained. It took a little longer to get that hesitation out, but look at it, now 13th year, I'm employee number one of NPCI, still with it, and I can say that there is never a dull moment in that sense. So that's a bit of my background, Mehul.
Great, thanks, Dilip. Thank you, Dilip. And I think you said it extremely well. I mean, what you're doing is a public good, right? And that kind of underscores not just the accomplishment, but the importance of the work that you're doing, of course, with NPCI and beyond. So, look, using that kind of now to jump a little bit into our discussion. I mean, just to ease into the specifics of NPCI, in terms of UPI, RuPay, and so on. Kind of, how would you frame your early struggles in fintech? Um, you know, I mean, how did you stumble into this? Yes, payment is one part. Digitizing, especially in an extremely, diverse environment that we have in India, is another part. But how would you frame those early days?
See, Mehul, I don't know whether I really chose, and there were many opportunities in that sense. One is the financial technologies was one of the opportunities, because most of the things were done before were manual, less of digitization. The national the banks have recently been migrated back to the whole computerization drive of the bank happened in 1990s or early 2000 in that sense. So, when we were looking at, when anybody who's actually passing out graduation in engineering as a technologist, there are multiple areas which we had. By then, I think one of the first fields which started the digitalization or a use of technology in a big way is the banking and financial services. At the same time, the NSE was being set up, the stock markets were doing very well. So I think the financial services was a very natural choice for any technologies in that sense, because the commerce and other digitization of the other sectors was not that prevalent. And one of the advantage of being old enough, what I can say, Mehul. So I think the working with the technology companies was a very natural choice in that sense, rather than working for a bank, working for a what do you call any other institution or any other sector like commerce or for that matter any other part. I think the financial services and the technology enablement of the financial services as a sector was a big drive, and thanks to the regulators on all sides, whether it's RBI, SEBI, or IDA, I think the regulators were also pushed forward to the technology adoption in that sense. Very technology, and I'm talking about this 2000 onwards, so about 22, 23 years back. And I think that actually drove me automatically. I cannot say that it was a very conscious call, but it was like a natural choice to be with the financial services technology companies and what we call it as fintech today.
So, in that sense, Dilip, how would you frame, if you kind of took a step back, because you've done so many different things, right? I mean, of course, there is, as I like to call it, a method to the madness in terms of how you were building. But if you were to step back and if you were to kind of wean out the structural components, right, saying that from your perspective, how would you frame, and at this point we're kind of still keeping this relatively more general, but how would you frame the building blocks of fintech? How would you frame the core components, the foundation? Personally, I always, and with my telecommunication background, I think that's where that prejudice comes from, but I kind of always tend to look at things in tiers, and I said there's a utility tier and then there's a usability tier. And so as a technocrat, uh, how do you look at the foundational core components of fintech?
See, when when you look at the NPCI journey and overall, I think the financial services is a basic need, for anybody who's living, right. So for him, the exchange of money, buy, sell, payments, money transfer is as critical and basic, right? As or the banking or savings or whatever credit for that matter. Credit is obviously is evolving and may not be accessible to all. But the basic banking, financial services, the payments is part of every human being's life who's living on this earth and who's part of this social community network. So when you look at the initial part, the initial path of the financial services or fintech actually worked on how do we make the access, right? How do we make the access or inclusion to the formal economy or formal digital formal financial services. So the initial use of the technology, if I understand correctly, it was more towards the access, right? Whether am I able to get access to the bank branch, whether I'm able to open the account, whether I'm able to go back to the ATM and withdraw the cash. How does the cash management, currency management happens? I think the whole first 7-8 years was on the access, right? Then the second phase which came in, that yes, that access is good enough, but it has a huge physical touch to it, right? Which was only physical. The banking, everything was only and only physical. The second phase of this financial services, which I can talk about, which and there are many game changers. The starting of the depositories in the financial services, the core banking, migration of the banks, the starting of the channels such as mobile banking, internet banking, and Mehul, you built up one of your earlier one of the initiatives, built up the mobile banking app for one of the leading banks in India. So I think the second phase actually started, and that was more like, how do we convert to digital, right? So it was a physical plus digital, phygital, I may talk about. And there were while there was some initiatives on, NPCI was started by then. Very recently we did the check truncation, we did the interoperable ATM, largest ATM network in the world. We did IMPS. There was some innovation, and again, thanks to Mr. Hoota's all initiatives, that we started with IMPS as a real-time payment system. And so that was the mode of the time of phygital, right? So while some of the early adopters can be on a digital, right, but predominantly the banking financial services was on a digital, while the trading happened real time on the stock markets. People actually queued up with the brokers, and broker had the terminal and do the trading for them, or vice versa for going back to the ATM, withdrawing the cash, and those kind of things. The third stage and last 3-4 years, I may talk about. I think it is more and more digital, and every year passing by is re-emphasizing back that movement and accelerating that movement to only digital situation. And I can talk about three turning points to this, Mehul. One was the Prime Minister talking about the whole jam trinity in terms of Jandan, opening up the 300 million Jandan accounts, the opening up of Aadhaar to the ecosystem for eKYC, authentication, variety of services, and this whole mobile, right? The smartphone penetration, a start of acceleration of the smartphone penetration in India. Right, so I think the Jam Trinity was the first big game changer for us. I actually, he meant a lot of things by then, but obviously it was not clear to many of us. But I think slowly, it started getting clearer that what he actually meant by how this Jam Trinity will fuel the growth in the digital financial services of the country. The second thing was demonetization. Obviously, after the striking of the high value denominations in the country, obviously everybody was now started looking at, yes, there is a viable alternative, and I think the demonetization exercise re-emphasized to the every Indian, yeah, yes, there is an alternative to cash, right? Till then, I don't think people really understood there is an alternative to cash to make your daily transactions, payments, or any other transactions. And the third part, I think the COVID last 2 years, COVID has been a big game changer. Again, it pushed back the acceleration in a big way worldwide, not only India, but I think the advantage in India, what we got with the thanks to RBI and the government's vision, we had the platforms ready and ready to scale up big time, right? With the strengthening of NPCI, the other payment platforms, the innovation focus of the government and RBI. We were all it had the vibrant ecosystem, it had the fintechs, banks, collaborations in place, it had the NPCI as a public good central payments platform. So it kind of fueled the growth big time in last 2 years thanks to COVID, because I think the consumer was ready, the ecosystem was ready, and the situation was forced on the consumer to move digital for all aspects. Mehul, not only the financial payment transactions or whatever it is. I think most of the activities got digitized after the COVID, because I think the consumer was ready, the platform was ready, the ecosystems, vibrant fintech ecosystem was ready by then. And banks also were very much ahead on the digitization drive. It took some time for them to pick up, but I think now you look at most of the banks are truly digital banks in India, whether it's a leading bank or leading private banks or public sector banks. leave apart so I think there were three phases I think India has gone through and the fintech evolution has gone through. So the initial phase, again, if I just have to paraphrase Mehul, the initial was the access, and there were many financial technologies companies started by then. Euronet was the one, FinTech, FSS, Opus, and FI, a variety of companies in India which we saw enabling the access. Then the whole digital world started, and again, your company like CSAM, people built the internet banking, mobile banking, the payment, digital payment apps journey started. And the third era is the fully digitization only era, which is like a UPI and the IndiaStack in that sense. Sorry for the long answer, but I thought I should make a justice explaining back in detail the three periods which I saw personally.
No, no, no. Please don't apologize. On the contrary, this is great. And, I was making few notes. By the way, this is the first time I'm hearing the term phygital, Dilip. And you're absolutely right. I mean, that's the best way to describe it. So I'm going to borrow that term from you because I think it says it extremely well. And frankly, if I can probe you a little bit more, push you a little bit more for our kind of students of fintech, not academic students, but those who are now kind of coming into this fintech era and want to, clearly build the next wave of, everything from apps to services to, disruption, whatever you want to call it. If you had to kind of take a stab with all your experiences, uh, what would your guidance to them be on how best to approach adoption and then how to kind of transition as you start towards figuring out scale? And the reason I would love to hear this from you, and again, I think our audience can benefit immensely, is as you know very well, okay, these are two very different things. And in your case, you have had to figure out adoption in an extremely difficult environment. I mean, I can only begin to relate because I've done, some work in India. But based on that, I know for a fact that there are just so many complexities that you have to solve for, and yet you found a way to drive adoption. And then once you figured out how to get adoption, you have also then transitioned, put the blocks in place, and you've managed to kind of build scale, which is unrivaled, right? In that sense. So, can you talk a little bit to that, Dilip? And again, not to look for anything that you perceive to be sensitive, but I think it would be of immense value to our audience if they can hear from you kind of how they should think of adoption based on your experiences and then how they should view scale differently.
So, great question, Mehul. I think if the yeah, and let me take a shot. I'm not a guru in fintech, but let me take my shot at this. I think before we start anything, any idea, Mehul, I think the everybody knows there has to be some real problem to solve, right? If you are trying to and real problem to solve in a significant way, right? I think it's a basic starting point for any fintech. It is what I can think of. If you are trying to provide the incremental effort, if you are trying to provide the efficiency, if you are trying to undercut your pricing to offer something else, I think it will have a limited self. Whatever you try to do in that, it may have the limited shelf life from the time perspective. So, if you have a real problem to solve, real in a very significant way, is a basic starting point. Second is the use of technology, right? I think the use of technology. Today the technology has scaled up uh, amazingly well in terms of having the open source. So the cost of building tech with the cloud and with this whole open source evolution has come down dramatically down, and I think it's going to go further crazy, right, with the low code no code platforms and the the use of AI and the whole software 3.0 or 2.0 story, right? So I assume that anybody who wants to build up the fintech, it has to make it like a deep tech company, right? You can't build up a fintech, at least now in India, as a superficial technology organization, right? So, and it has a great long term advantage, right? You will build a agile org, you will build a low cost org, you will build a futuristic tech which will be able to deal with most of the problems in a very cost effective way, right? So technology is the second lever which I can think for a fintech. And third, last but not the least, is the ecosystem. I somewhere strongly believe that if there is an ecosystem, and when I say ecosystem, it's not about the one actor or two actors. I'm talking about most of the actors, which really matters for any evolution to happen, right? So be it regulators, right? How regulators are innovation, how they look at the innovation, how are they driving the change, how are they looking at a forward-looking regulations as far as the financial services or any other services are concerned in any area. The how the banks or financial institutions are leveraged, whether they are looking at opening up their system to connect, collaborate on APIs, right? And third is, what is the what are the other fintech startups actually looking at this whole thing? So I think these are the three things comes to my mind, uh, uh, Mehul, that if the fintechs has to somebody has to start. One is you need a great problem to solve or a great idea, and second is the deep tech organization, and third is the diverse and vibrant ecosystem. Is These are the three things which I would rate as a important, very important to consider before you actually start jumping into.
Great. No, absolutely, Dilip. Absolutely. And look, I just to digress a little bit, kind of, going back in time in terms of my own experiences. As I started working as a technocrat, and especially not being or being a non-financial person, let me put it that way, as I started to look at financial services in the very early days. And we clearly at that time were doing things that we felt were very disruptive. We had I should say, a very, kind of myopic view of regulators. I mean, very simply put, as a technocrat and disruptor, I always viewed regulators to not understand innovation and not, kind of doing justice to innovation. And then along the way, I had an opportunity to actually start engaging with regulators, and also had an opportunity to work alongside them and across different markets. I had an opportunity to do this in the US, a little bit in India, a little bit in Mexico, And as I kind of started to get a little better sense of their world, got a peek into their complexities, my respect for them went up exponentially, right? And so I guess the build-up that I have for you, and you have been working kind of where innovation and regulation comes together. Uh, Having seen you work on a daily basis, I know for a fact on a daily basis you have to resolve things on the innovation side, resolve things on the regulation side, and find ways to kind of find that common ground and then move forward. And that too, once again, in a highly complex environment and building scale. What is your part observation and part advice to folks out there, right? Especially folks who, like me, are, like the way I used to view it in my early days, saying that no, as a disruptor, all regulators are bad, they don't get it, which is not true. What is your kind of guidance to them, Dilip? How should they approach, especially in a space, related to financial services, right? Health tech is the same. What is your guidance? What is your advice to them?
See, first of all, Mehul, I just cannot agree more, right? And a regulator's life is a regulator's life, be it any regulator in that sense. And when everything goes right, no, nobody gives them credit. And when anything goes wrong, anything goes wrong, they get the blame. And to be honest, Mehul, last 13 years with NPCI, I have understood that it is going to be, you have to be extremely, extremely lucky and fortunate to do everything right in your for by any institution like a regulator, for example, right? So many a times, because this path of innovation, this path of change, right, creates its own problems, right? But I think, what is the choice? Whether taking that, not taking that path, or of change, of innovation, is there a choice? There is no choice, right? So you have to take that path. But if you really ask me, what is it, and obviously, so fintech thinking, the way you suggested that the regulators don't understand this is quite legitimate, because they are only looking at the technology and its positives, right? But the technology brings in the negatives as well, right? And today at NPCI, or I'm sure at the RBI, the when there is a consideration, when there is a thinking, the what are the issues which technology can cause, right? Because you have to, RBI's job is to not grow the ecosystem. RBI's primary job is to save and protect this 1.3 billion people, right? That's the core job of the regulator. And how it will go, and how it will create some problems or unintended consequences of technology or the innovation. I think that's a primary job of RBI, to keep on mitigating that. And are there enough mitigants possible, is their job. So I think I'm, again, going back, immense respect for the regulators in my life. And it's a one of the most difficult roles which I have seen in a public life. So now, how do we solve for it? How do we solve for it? And Mehul, I will tell you based on my India experience, right? And there are 2-3 ways I would like to advise to the fintechs who are looking at something which is very, very innovative, path breaking, and they believe that they need a regulatory support. When we were discussing, and one of the sessions, I heard our deputy governor, Sri Ravi Shankar, and he used the word, the responsible innovation. He used the term responsible innovation. I think I was a little bit stuck. I know I reflected a number of times, that responsible innovation, what it means and what it is can be called for. And I think there is a huge meaning to this term responsible innovation. And I think the more you look at, and while you want to while you want to use your platforms by public, right? In the public, if the public are going to use your platform, whatever, large or big, it becomes a public platform. Now, when you are building a public platform, what are the areas which a fintech should look at? And I'm just taking this responsible innovation ahead, right? Whether your solution actually has the inbuilt customer protection, whether your solution has the grievance redressal mechanism for the customer, if he wants to do that. Because, and when I say that, the grievance redressal mechanism is, again, not a phone call, not going back to anybody. And we face this problem with UPI a lot. While the scale is so high, customer can't keep calling up on the call centers. He can't even reach a person. So this is where the regulator thought of the online dispute resolution, not the online dispute complaint, but online dispute resolution as a concept, first of its kind. So I think the responsible innovation has to be drawn up back to your plans, your understanding of the problem, and how are you going to solve it. I think this is one way to look at it, Mehul. The second way I would look at it, and this is what my, again, personal experience, I see the regulators worldwide, not only in India, worldwide, becoming very, very open for interaction, engagement with the ecosystem, right? So I think the fintechs should approach and openly and meet up the regulators and voice over the strategy plan, what they intend to do, or what are they doing right now. I think the regulator, while the regulator cannot bless or openly agree, but they might derive some good or great inputs from the regulator in terms of how they should approach the matter in that sense. So I believe one is looking at how do they create work for responsible creating work responsible innovation, and second is approaching and interacting with the regulator are the two key. Just by saying that the regulator is not supporting or regulator is not, you will have to understand. If you understand why regulator is not agreeing on your views or why the regulation does not exist, there must be reason. And once you understand the reason, you can structure your methodology, your approach much better, and in line with the regulation of that particular country.
Oh, that's great, Dilip. That's great advice, and I would strongly recommend the audience to pay a lot of attention and take what you've said extremely seriously. And I mean, again, kind of borrowing the term responsible innovation. With your lens of responsible innovation, Dilip, how do you view now all the current trends and hype around decentralized finance? And kind of how do you view that lending to what I call democratizing finance, right? And that actually goes back to kind of your journey of access and inclusion. So if you can just again comment on both, right, with your responsible innovation lens on.
See again, the rate of pace of change for the technology is so high. I think all of us are still framing our views, framing our training our mind to how to deal with this the technology, and there are a lot of discussions, right? There are a lot of discussions, debates happening whether the centralization, decentralization, democratization, and there are many such protocol level conversations that have started happening back in India now. So I think there are many conversations are happening in India right now, and let me just tell you my take on that. I strongly believe the centralization is not harmful. In fact, it gives huge benefit back to the ecosystem, to the country as a whole, till the time it's looked at with the public good lens, right? So if we create a centralization for any activity, any platform, till the time it's public good, right? Till the time it does not have the ill intentions or the profiteering intentions or any other intent of that centralized. You understand the side effects of centralization. So till the time it's a public good, I think centralization is not bad, right? Centralization do creates some sort of operational risk, I may say so, right? Because then you are dependent on the platform to get the services, right? But there are a variety of ways you can structure your technology stack to ensure that the operational risk is dealt with adequately. Now the second point I would like to touch upon is the democratization. Again, when you look at the centralization with the public good, technically that's democratization in my assessment, right? And which is what we have seen some of the public platforms in India, whether it's Aadhaar, whether it's Cowin, whether it's UPI, or whether it's NPCI's other platforms. We see that it's a centralization, public good, resulting it back to the democratization of the activity, right? People have the access of to the services at almost like a zero cost, zero trouble, right? That's what I see that. Now let's move to and is it good for the country? I think it's great for the country. Obviously, as I spoke about, any institution can't do 100% good. Obviously the evolution, the change brings in its drawbacks, and you'll have to continue to work on those mitigations, Mehul. That it's a part of life, but obviously we can't stop changing or stop looking at how do we push forward. Now, when you look at this whole Web3 conversation, decentralization and the protocol level strategy, I think it's a great technology in my assessment. I'm personally very bullish on this technology, but I think what happens is the companies working on this, are actually driving their mind towards the crypto or a stable coins in that sense, right? That's a single track mind I see. but the technology of the decentralization platforms or the protocol levels, right, is super powerful. It is way beyond crypto and way beyond this whole currency aspect of it. And in my assessment, we at NPCI are also very bullish on this, and I'm sure that while India has taken lead in most of the things, I'm very very confident that India will also take lead on the protocol level strategies and the decentralized platforms in that sense.
Great, perfect. No, thanks, Dilip. So, look, now to kind of transition a little bit uh, to talk about the future, right? And I'll kind of just do a little bit of the frame up. But for lots of different reasons, many of which are organic. And what I mean by that is that, in India, so many different forces have been at play. So much work has gone into this over decades. As a matter of fact, that over the last 3 decades, I've had an experience to, or I've had an opportunity to experience. But then combine that with, let's just call it, some of the recent developments, the last few years, geopolitical developments, and so on. I think there is now broad consensus around the world that the next 10 to 25 years are really India's, right? And what I mean by that is that there is an opportunity for India to grow leaps and bounds. Whether it's our demography, which gives us a huge advantage, whether it's our place in the world, which gives us a huge advantage, and whether it's a lot of foundational work, right, including what you have done, which gives us tremendous advantage. So there is that consensus that the next 10 to 25 years are really for India to grow leaps and bounds. And with that, kind of, where do you think UPI, RuPay, and all the hard work that you've been doing over the last 10, 13 years, where do you see that to be in the next, let's say, 10 to 25 years? B, how do you see IndiaStack, which is now fairly well upon us? How do you see that over the next 10 to 25 years? And in general, kind of, what is your view of business as usual when it comes to payments and disruption when it comes to payments as this growth really starts to accelerate?
See, let me respond back to this in a couple of two three parts. So the first part is, I can't agree more that India can be a great example to many countries when they look at how do you ensure that you live in a minimal geopolitical risk in that sense. And I, of course, a lot of credit comes to NPCI, but I think the really, when you look at now, India is fairly self-sufficient on the payment system or digitization of the finance. And I think credit goes back to the RBI and the government. And I think they understood this risk long back, and creation, right from the creation of the entity like NPCI, and promoting innovation and promoting the variety of payment platforms which are nowhere in the world, right? Which is again is the what you call a complete clarity on how do we deal. India being such a large country needs to have its own domestic payment systems, domestic platforms, and I think it is proving right in every aspect, Mehul. And I just want to take a little bit, couple of minutes more to explain this bit more detail. And it's not only the geopolitical risk, right? Because a country has its own ask and needs, right? Which many of the global institutions won't be able to fulfill, right? And this is a standard fight or debate between the standardization versus the localization, right? And today, for a large populating countries, will have more needs on localization versus the standardization. While the standardization continues to be an approach, but the localization becomes a need of the hour to reach towards that standardization, right? And today, very glad, very satisfying, Mehul, to see that what India has done to build up this public good infrastructures. And as our Prime Minister keeps talking about, now we are in the process of helping the other countries that they can look at India, they can learn from India and build the domestic strength, right? Use the NPCI or the IndiaStack to to build up that self-reliant and a vibrant domestic digital financial services, right? Whether it's a open ID project, whether it's a the NPCI's platform, and we are very open to the central banks worldwide under the central bank to central bank arrangement or a government to government arrangement. We are, in fact, we are open sourcing our platforms to that country, right? And we believe that this is the only way this current geopolitical risk maybe help to accelerate, but it's inevitable to have than to have a efficient and innovation-led domestic payment public good platforms. Coming back to the second point, you have been talking about, how do you see that the future looks like, and again, it's a very difficult question to answer, and I don't believe that there is a answer to that, right? Because the way I look at it, again, the variety of things will come. And when we look at, country like India, we strongly believe there are multiple solutions required, and a solution will not be able to drive all the requirement which 1.3 billion population uh, has. Is I see that emergence of central bank digital currencies as a one of the motivators, because it offers an instant settlements, more secure way to make payments. I look at this whole Web3, Web2 platforms, coexist to a large sense and ensure that the advantages of Web3 is preserved in a responsible way, and the risk of Web2 platforms are mitigated in a responsible way. I see that the use of the whole protocol led approach, and I keep talking to Pramod Verma, and he keeps now talking on the protocol led approach. I fully agree that most of the new platforms which India will build will take the route of protocol driven approach instead of centralization or a decentralization in that sense. So I think it's going to be a variety of things which we believe can happen when you look at such a long period of 10, 20 years. Again, when I look at this whole tokenization of asset, the power of smart contracts, I think we are standing and looking at very exciting future, uh, Mehul, and I assume and I hope that NPCI will continue to drive and play a very important role as what RBI and the government desires.
No, absolutely, Dilip. And so, look, as we wrap up the conversation, I have to end this segment by asking you that at a kind of a deeply personal level, what, in your opinion, is the holy grail of fintech?
No, I am very bullish because I personally think fintech has a great future, right? A responsible innovation has a great future in the not only in India but in the worldwide. Uh, Obviously the fintech will have to keep some things in mind in terms of how do they plan their the three things which we spoke about, what's the why, and how do you use the technology in a deep tech, and the third is how do you engage with the ecosystem, right? These are the three important parameters for any fintech to be successful. But I personally think it's a solid story. It's going to be very interesting to see their growth, and but obviously it's a long term story, Mehul. I don't think people, this whole stories of valuation getting double tripled in a year, right? I think it's all hoax in that sense. I am sure you're aware about that. So I think if you leave aside this whole valuation story, if you leave aside all this uh, the not so good part of the fintech. But if you are really trying to make solve the problem, if the founders are really committed to solve the problem, if the founders are really able to add the value in a significant way to the whether it to the customers, consumers, or businesses in that matter, the fintechs who are ready to collaborate with a bank, with a financial ecosystem or a regulated ecosystem in the of the country. I think, in my personal opinion, the future is great, Mehul, and I'm very, very bullish. And we at NPCI are committed to drive the growth and engagement with the fintechs.
Great. That's the perfect note to end our conversation today, Dilip. So once again, thank you so much for your time. Uh, you know, I know how extremely busy and stretched you are. As in, I know so many folks want a piece of you. So I really appreciate your carving out time for us. And of course, I want to extend my thanks to our audience out there for allowing us into their lives and giving us their time as well. As we normally do, the Tantra team will publish the podcast first, and then there will be a white paper out as well, kind of to act like a little bit of a synopsis. And stay tuned for our next edition on the Holy Grail of FinTech, where we continue to kind of explore the evolution and what the Holy Grail of FinTech means to different guests around the world. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Mehul.